And believe it or not, this is all based on pure physics. The Immortal vs. Omni-Man. With over 10 million views and counting, it is among the most watched fight scenes on YouTube. So today, in the name of science, we're gonna take a closer look at one specific part of that battle and try to find out why that particular collision is actually more grounded in real life than we might think at first glance. So, to give you a little bit more context why this battle is happening at all, for starters, the Immortal is part of a group of superheroes called the Guardians of the Globe. Omni-Man decides to betray them because Earth must be conquered at all costs. The Immortal and his fellow teammates perish during the battle with him. However, the Immortal is not called the Immortal for nothing and comes back to life.
Where is Omni-Man? Where is he?
Oh, he said it. He said the thing. The Immortal, now out for vengeance, battles Omni-Man, which eventually leads to the penultimate collision we see here. And believe it or not, this is all based on pure physics. Except without the immortality part. And the flying part. And the mustached extraterrestrial part. But other than that though, the collision is still very much based on real-life physics. So technically I'm not lying. But first let's take a quick look at the power set of both combatants. In one corner we have Omni-Man, who has flight, super strength, and increased durability. And in the other corner we have the Immortal, who has flight, super strength, increased durability, and the added bonus of immortality. So on paper these two should be equally matched, right? The only problem with these two sharing the same powers is that...
You just said each member of the team is chosen for their unique abilities. He does exactly what I do, but better.
So yeah, based on its physiology, it is shown and confirmed that the Immortal inherently has a lower durability level than Omni-Man, and is also weaker than him in every other category. So with this information, it shouldn't be possible for the Immortal to do what we see here, right? But yet it does.
Are you sure?
So the biggest question of this video will be how the Immortal was able to knock Omni-Man out of the sky, despite being less durable than him. For this explanation I did quite some research. I even went as far as asking my former college professor for advice. So after watching that scene, I first started to ask myself the question, is it possible for a softer object to knock away a harder object? I then started searching and came across this page from physics.stackexchange.com. which came closer to what I was looking for. And when I went through all the answers, I stumbled upon a very interesting piece of information. But to understand what they are talking about, we first have to define some physics-related terminology. Because if we don't, it will all devolve into some science mumbo-jumbo. So, there is this term in physics called momentum, which according to physicsclassroom.com refers to the quantity of motion that an object has. Which basically means when something is moving, the more massive it is, and the more speed it has, the more difficult it will be to stop it. You can calculate the momentum by taking the product of the object's mass and its velocity. Increasing the mass or increasing the velocity, or both, will increase the momentum. So just remember, the more momentum an object has, the more difficult it will be to stop it. Which I said 2 sentences ago. The other term is impulse, which according to physicsclassroom.com is when a force acts upon an object for a given amount of time to cause a change in momentum. Which basically means the power you use to slow something down or make it go even faster. These two terms are actually part of the impulse momentum change theorem, which in turn is actually a derivative of Newton's second law, which states that the acceleration of an object is directly proportional to the net force acting upon the object and inversely proportional to the mass of the object. Just to let you know, but in this video I will not go any deeper on that. Okay, so with that out of the way, we can finally focus on the answer I found on physics.stackexchange.com, which brought up another work of physics called Thinking Physics, Practical Lessons in Critical Thinking. Where on page 81 the question was asked, which stated, a rubber bullet and an aluminum bullet both have the same size, speed, and mass. They are fired at a block of wood. Which is most likely to knock the block over? A. The rubber bullet. B. The illuminated bullet. C. Both the same. The answer to the first question is A. The rubber bullet. The explanation they provided was, in both cases, the equal momentum of the bullets is changed upon impact with a block. But the impulses involved are different because the rubber bullet bounces and the aluminum bullet penetrates. The momentum of the aluminum bullet is completely transferred to the block, which supplies the necessary impulse to stop it. But the impulse is greater for the rubber bullet, for the block not only supplies the necessary impulse to stop it, but provides an additional impulse to throw the bullet back out again. Depending on the elasticity of the rebound, this results in up to twice the impulse for the impact of the rubber bullet, and therefore up to twice the momentum imparted to the block. So the rubber bullet is very much more likely to knock the block over. So if we translate this knowledge beat for beat over to the collision between Omni-Man and the Immortal, we can pretend that Omni-Man is a block of wood and the Immortal is a rubber bullet. So when the Immortal flies into Omni-Man, Omni-Man not only supplies the necessary impulse to stop him, but provides additional impulse to quote-unquote throw the Immortal back out again. Depending on the elasticity of the rebound, this results in up to twice the impulse for the impact of the Immortal, and therefore up to twice the momentum imparted to Omni-Man. So the Immortal is very much likely to knock Omni-Man over. So it's not durability but rather elasticity that made this feat possible. But there is even more to this. If we look at the second part of the answer, it actually corresponds very closely with what we see on screen. So in the answer it said, although the rubber bullet gives the block the most momentum, it does not give it the most energy. If the bullet bounces back with a lot of speed, that means it keeps most of its kinetic energy for itself. Whereas the aluminum bullet stops and therefore surrenders all its kinetic energy. This surrendered energy goes into the block. It is most important to note that this added energy the aluminum bullet puts in does not have any momentum to go with it. Energy without momentum can't be kinetic energy. It must be some other kind of energy. The energy of heat, deformation, and damage. So we see that the rubber bullet puts a lot of momentum, but little energy into the block. And that's very much what happens during the collision. The Immortal is able to knock Omni-Man away, but Omni-Man does not sustain any damage from it afterwards. And now we can also just calculate the momentum he had right before the collision. So from these sources we know that the Immortal has a height of 6 feet and 4 inches and a mass of 260 pounds or 117.9 kilograms. So if we look at the footage we see that it's shot at 24 frames per second. I took a screenshot and used the length of the Immortal to see what kind of distance he was covering. And I ended with a distance of 12 Immortals. Which sounds as silly as it should be, which amounts to 72 feet and 48 inches, or 21.95 meters and 1.220 meters respectively. So in total a distance of 23.17 meters. He covered that distance in the span of 5 frames according to my video editor program. To know what distance he was flying in 1 second, all we have to do is divide that distance by 5 and then multiply that distance by 24, which equals to 111.21 meters per second. Which is about 400 kilometers per hour, which is really fast. So we now know at what velocity the Immortal was flying. Now we can calculate his momentum, which is 117.9 kilograms times 111.2 meters per second, which equals to the Immortal having a momentum of 13,111.8 kilograms meters per second. We repeat these steps again, this time with the height and mass of Omni-Man, which are respectively 6 feet, 2 inches, and 250 pounds, or 113.4 kilograms. And we end up with a distance of 72 feet, at 24 inches, or 21.95 meters, and 0.1696 meters, or in total 22.56 meters for 5 frames, or 108.3 meters per second. So, Omni-Man's momentum will be 113.4 kilograms times 108.3 meters per second, which equals to 12,279.6 kilograms meters per second. And there we finally conclude that Omni-Man had less momentum than the Immortal. So there you have it. With the help of science we were able to explain why the Immortal was capable of knocking Omni-Man out of the sky while staying intact simultaneously. Thank you for watching, and consider subscribing and liking to see more videos like this in the future.